समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The 14-point Memorandum of Understanding between the US and Iran has been signed. All of us know the points right now. I will not go through them. In fact, you will see them on your screen as we talk. You will see them now, or maybe it will keep appearing again and again, now and then. So you can see these points if you want to absorb them. But by this time, everybody knows it. The fun part is that, or ironical part is, or the great irony is that this was signed in the Palace of Versailles. Palace of Versailles, which is sometimes called the venue for bad treaties, because some of the peace treaties, this was the home in fact of French politics and French diplomacy between 1682 and 1789. But history now, at least our generation and generations onwards, will remember Versailles basically for the so-called Treaty of Versailles, which is 28 June 1919, 107 years back. In fact, almost on the 107th anniversary on that failed Treaty of Versailles. It failed because it was too tough on Germany for them to accept this humiliation, because they lost so much territory, so much areas where they could mine iron, coal, etc., etc. So many colonies outside, and became almost a sub-sovereign state. That was not going to be sustainable. And second, it was seen as not being strong enough to prevent a German resurgence. Now, has something like that happened in this 14-point MoU as well? Now, why did Trump sign it in Versailles? We know that Trump may not bother so much about history. He just thinks it's a nice, beautiful palace. He's dazzled by things European. So maybe the irony missed him. And people in his team don't particularly want to remind him of it. Or maybe Macron was playing a cruel joke on him. Nevertheless, he signed this 14-point Memorandum of Understanding there. It's also quite likely that Trump thinks that this is an Iranian document of surrender, that Iranians have been humiliated, they are surrendering. In fact, if you make a reading of it, it's far from it. Nobody that I've read, including those who support Trump or those on the American right, are calling it a great success for the Americans. Some on the Trumpian right may not criticize Trump for it, but they are quiet, and that silence tells you that even they are a little bit embarrassed or uncertain about what has happened. Now, Trump goes on and on saying that if the Iranians don't behave, if they don't keep their promises, then I will come back at them with bombs. At the same time, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, who's the Iranian speaker and effectively the most prominent face of the Iranian regime now, he said that we hope that the enemy will understand the language of logic, or we will again return to the language of power. So he's using this language. He's also saying, and he says that we have our finger on the trigger. We also see this document, Shehbaz Sharif, Pakistan's Prime Minister, has signed as a mediator, as a kind of witness to this Memorandum of Understanding, which has led to a great deal of celebration in Pakistan, which you can understand. Now, this done, let me look at the points arising from this. And once again, as we did last Monday, this will have a fair bit of commentary and opinion, because this is such an important term that really there is no clutter in it. These are very straightforward 14 points. However, what arises from this lends itself to a great deal of analysis and opinion. And that's what I'm going to give to you today. That's why this also is an unusual episode of Cut the Clutter. So point number 1, see our 50-word edit on this. It's on your screens. I will read it for you. Trump joined the war out of FOMO. FOMO is fear of missing out, because he thought Netanyahu was the only one having this fun, so I should also join in. Iranians are easy targets to hit. We will quickly declare victory, have a regime change, etc. He also probably bought into that idea from Netanyahu, and that's where this 50-word edit is coming from. So let me again read this to you. Just 50 words. Trump joined the war out of FOMO. He capitulated with minimal gain because of buyer's remorse. Then the epiphany. Why not use Iran as a balancing power and put America's spoiled friends in their place? That's how he buried the hatchet with Iran in the back of the Gulf Arabs and Israel. That is the sum total of our analysis and opinion on this term. Let me elaborate. Point 2, therefore, Trump came in. He figured he did not want to be in this fight forever. He thought he had come in thinking it will last a week, maybe less than a week, maybe 2 weeks. But as it went on, he realized that he was getting caught in a quagmire. Iran is a population of nearly 9.5 crore people. They are very nationalistic. They will hang together whatever their problems with their regime. Plus, Iranians showed him that they have incredible ability to take attrition. They suffered so much damage. They suffered enormous damage. Their leadership was wiped out, but they were still standing there. That is not what Trump was prepared for. That's why from about second week onwards, he was desperate to declare victory. The same thing he had done after Midnight Hammer last year when he sent in his heavy stealth bombers to attack those nuclear sites. Immediately the next day, he closed the war by declaring victory. He said Iran's uranium and nuclear facilities have been totally obliterated. He wanted something like that now. Usko izzat bachane ki zarurat thi. He had got caught in this war. He did not want a land invasion. He did not even want to take the Kharg Island because that would have sent a bunch of body bags home. He did not want any of that. His base did not want him to fight anymore. That's why he wanted out. And that was the most important thing for him, to find a way of getting out. And the Iranians also figured that that was his compulsion. So the Iranians played with that because Iranians thought that we found a way of giving him trouble. We've got a lever in Strait of Hormuz. This is sending global oil prices up. This will create problems for Trump in his domestic politics as gas prices go up. So we can prolong this for as long as we wish, as long as we are willing to take this damage. That is what Trump was not prepared for. Next point, democracies, and I have written this often, democracies essentially are much stronger than dictatorships. But they are much stronger when it comes to either protecting themselves directly or protecting what is their direct interest. When it comes to going and fighting for an ideology someplace, or when it comes to going to fight for a coalition someplace, or when it comes to going to fight for some ally someplace, only for some ally, then democracies are not that strong, because then public opinion in democracies matters. Public opinion in Iran today does not matter as long as the regime is strong. Public opinion in China does not matter as long as Xi Jinping is totally in control. Public opinion in Russia does not matter as long as Putin is fully in control. Public opinion in Saudi Arabia does not matter as long as the royal family is fully in control. As for Jordan, as for Egypt, Sisi, the dictator, is in control. But public opinion matters in democracies, and their public opinion can turn against a war unless they think the war is for our own self-defense, our own survival, our own supreme national interest. Then democracies are the hardest states. Nobody can then defeat a democracy in any such war where a democracy fights to protect its own direct interest or its territory or its existence. A democracy or a set of democracies always win. Whereas when it comes to extraneous wars, then democracies face internal pressures. That's what happened with the Americans in Vietnam. That's why they were timed out. That's what happened to them in Afghanistan. They decided to do nation building in Afghanistan. They were timed out. They decided to do nation building in Iraq. It did not fail as badly as Afghanistan, but did not work out because the people who are in power are not the people that Americans would have liked to see in power. In Iran, they figured that they failed to do this in Afghanistan and Iraq, which are much smaller nations than Iran. And Iran is an ideological Shia state. So they did not want to do it. And American public opinion also did not want to do it. We have to remember that even in the Second World War, Americans were very reluctant to get involved on behalf of the Europeans, their own European friends and allies. It's only the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. Americans were helping the Europeans before that, but they got directly involved only after the war came to their territory with Pearl Harbor. In this case, Iran war on 9.5 crore people. Trump saw no percentage for himself in dragging this. There was no ideology involved. And Israel at this point is not so popular in America even within Trump's base, because Israel has become unpopular because of Gaza, because of what's happening in West Bank, because of the settler violence. And a lot of people, even on the American right, have been saying that Israel exercises too much influence on American policy. That is also on the Trumpian right. Combine all this with domestic issues over oil price, inflation, and likely casualties if this fighting went on and Trump decided to call it a day. He did not want any more fighting. So it's not a question of who surrendered where, but I think it's quite evident that both sides wanted the fighting to be over. In this case, politically, Trump's sense of urgency was stronger. That's why the choice of Versailles is probably more an irony on him than on the Iranians. Then you come to the next point. Trump was now seeing it as Israel's war. Israel has been under attack from Iran, sometimes directly, but otherwise through the many proxies that Iranians have built. Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, many of these groups in Iraq, all of these have been attacking Israel. These are all proxies of Iran. And sometimes Iran also attacks Israel directly in support of the proxy. So America came into this in aid of Israel. But did they want to fight Israel's war to the finish? Obviously, Trump did not. And that is what Trump showed in his repeated irritation with Netanyahu. In fact, in that interview with Barak Ravid of Axios, he used the word effing several times for Netanyahu. He said, Bibi, Netanyahu's nickname, Bibi has no effing judgment. And Barak Ravid said in his interviews later to TV channels that was used several times. So Trump was really irritated because Trump thought, probably, that's my understanding or guess or my reading, that this was Israel's war and he had been dragged into Israel's war, and Israel wanted to fight this war till the end of Iran or till the end of the Iranian regime. That is not what Trump had signed up for. This was a case, according to Trump. Now it's quite evident, quite obvious, and quite visible. This was the case of tail wagging the dog, and Trump did not want it. Next point, the fourth point, Trump obviously is using this as an opportunity to reshape West Asia or the Middle East. You can choose your expression. I prefer West Asia. He wants to shift the balance of power or reset the balance of power. So far, what was the balance of power? There was a whole bunch of Gulf Arab countries rich in oil and gas. They are American protectorates, that is Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, UAE, Saudi Arabia, essentially. And then there is Iran, opposed to everybody, but larger than everybody in terms of population and also fighting ability. And then Israel as an ally of the West, particularly as an ally of America. Israelis would not like to be seen as protectorate of America. In fact, in the Israeli election right now, one of the issues that the coalition against Netanyahu is raising is that Netanyahu made Israeli security too dependent on Washington. But look at it from Trump's point of view. Israel's security, I look after, I fight for Israel's security. All these Arab countries also are my protectorates. Everybody has enmity with Iran. If Iran is willing to settle, and if I can create some kind of a modus vivendi between all of them so they can live stably together. Where is the problem? Why should I get into this and try and shift this balance of power in their favor by destroying Iran? That is simply not worth it. In fact, in the first part of reshaping the Middle East, in his first term, Donald Trump brought legitimacy in the Arab world for Israel with Abraham Accords. That was towards the end of his tenure. Abraham Accords were signed in 2020 by UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and US, besides Israel. All of these countries, Arab countries, recognized Israel, and to that extent, Israel got legitimacy in the Arab world. That, I would say, was phase one in Trump's reshaping of the Middle East. The larger Muslim neighbors of Israel, Egypt and Turkey, not so close, but close enough, not Arab, but a very large Muslim nation, and Jordan, next door to Israel, they had already recognized it. So given all of this and the nations under Abraham Accords, Israel had got legitimacy in a large part of the Arab, Muslim, West Asian world. Turkey, in any case, is also a member of NATO. So Trump thought that was phase one. Phase two was beginning now. In phase two, with this memorandum of understanding, he's reminding Arabs that a permanent war with Iran is not sustainable, that their Islamic ideological issues with the Iranians or Shias and Sunnis are not America's problem. America can have good relations with either side. In fact, America had very good relations with Iran until the revolution took place in 1979. So it's the Gulf Arabs who need to find their own modus vivendi with Iran. Their armies cannot fight, they know, and now the world knows that Gulf Arab armies cannot fight, except honorable UAE, which, despite being so tiny, just about 1.3 million natives, they tried to fight back. None of the others did, despite their fancy armies. Most Gulf Arab countries are too rich, too small, and too unwilling to fight. They have no stomach for any attrition. And from Trump's point of view, look at Iran. Look at the amount of damage they took and kept on fighting. You got a couple of missile hits and you were running scared. So you cannot fight Iran. Find a way of adjusting with Iran, and I'll be there to make sure that Iran does not become a hegemon. The footnote to this is exactly what happens when a nation or a set of nations outsource their security to somebody else. That is exactly what the Europeans are facing right now, with Trump getting estranged from NATO and basically telling the Europeans, you fight for yourselves, you need weapons, I will give you weapons, but you pay for them. But don't expect me to come and fight for them. I think that's also the message that's going out to Japan, South Korea, Australia, and most importantly in that region, to Taiwan. Please, for heaven's sake, pay no attention. I see some discussion about this. Pay no attention to that comment Trump made in the presence of our Prime Minister, saying that I will come to, if you are under attack, I will come to your defense. He does not mean that he will come to India's defense if India is attacked by China or somebody. That is just an aside. He's saying as long as this man is there, if he's attacked, or if India is attacked while he's there, I will come. If somebody else is there, I may not. That is just Trump talking like Trump. Please do not draw any strategic meanings from it. I know most smart people don't, but still I thought it's better to underline that bit of caution. Point number 6, he's also rubbing the Gulf Arabs' nose in the ground a little bit. In essence, what this means is that he's telling Gulf Arabs that Iran needs $300 billion worth of reconstruction. You raise this money. You raise this money. Now, I don't know whether he thinks far enough. So he'd say it will be your investment, which means you will then have a vested interest in Iranian stability. And because Iran would have borrowed this money from you, that's how this will be accounted for. Iran will then be more responsible. They will act more responsibly. That will change Iran's conduct. I don't know if Trump thinks that far, but he said very clearly that America will pay no such money, and all of this will come from Gulf Arab countries. Now, that really puts the burden on the back of the Gulf Arabs. Effectively, what this means is you want your security, I'm there, but you also have to pay rent. You pay rent to me, you pay rent to Iran, or maybe what you do in Iran is actually a rent to me, because I don't want to spend any money in Iran. Point number 7, what happens between US and Iran now? Ever since the talks have started, Trump has been very kind to the Iranians. He's only used positive adjectives about them. These are different people, they are strong people, they are nationalists, etc., etc., etc. It is very clear that going ahead, he will only use military against Iran if there is an obvious threat to America's own assets or its direct protectorates. Obviously, if Iran again starts attacking Israel or Saudi Arabia or Qatar, they are most unlikely to, or any of these countries, Americans will carry out tit for tat attacks, maybe 4 tits for 1 tat, but they will not come into the war. The fate of Iranian nuclear program and uranium will be a protracted technical negotiation, and the Iranians will try and drag it for as long as possible, which brings us to point number 8. This will force the Arabs, the Gulf Arabs, to rethink life. Sudan, Yemen, Libya. In all three countries, Gulf Arabs are fighting each other. So UAE and Saudi Arabia are fighting each other in these countries. Enormous number of Arab Muslims are being killed, fighting as proxies for Saudi Arabia versus UAE's proxies. Can they afford this? Someone like Trump will be very bored with this, and he would think that these guys are just distracting the whole world. Why are they fighting these private battles there? Why are they carrying out this bloodshed? Because this will tomorrow also create terror groups. At the same time, all of these countries, all of these war zones are too far to be of any concern to Trump unless they breed terror. That is also the leverage of Pakistan. Point number 9. This MoU brings us to a very important question. What is the Middle East's or West Asia's leverage with the rest of the world? They have very few people. They're just about 15 crore people, less than 15 crore people. Their only leverage with the rest of the world is energy. But they are too unruly. They are fighting amongst themselves too much of the time and taking too much of the global attention and too much attention and investment from the sole superpower. This strengthens the other superpower. If these countries did not have this storehouse of oil and gas, who would bother? So the lesson of this MoU is that, look, you are doing what you're doing and you have your oil, and everybody has a stake in this oil. At the same time, Iranians also have a lot of oil. More oil is being found. It's not as if you invented oil and patented it. Oil is available elsewhere. If you are sitting on this resource, you also have to behave like responsible states, or be capable or be willing to fight to defend yourselves. And point number 10, this has left Netanyahu greatly weakened. In fact, if I see the Israeli opinion polls now, this is the election year. At this point, the coalition against him is leading 58 to 51. Israel has a very complex electoral system. I will do a full clutter on it in the course of time as we get closer to Israeli elections. But generally in Israel, you have proportionate representation. It's not as if an MP wins, a party wins, but to get any seats, you need to get a minimum of 3.25% vote. With 3.25% vote, you get 4 seats in a house of 120. 3.25% minimum limit is there so that parliament does not become too divided. With every 1%, 0.5%, somebody becomes an MP, and you have 120 parties for 120 seats. Not like that. So 3.25%. Today, irony of ironies, Netanyahu's hard right-wing religious coalition, his Likud party coalition, his coalition is trailing in the polls. Against him are Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid, both former prime ministers. In their Together party, Benny Gantz, who has a party of his own, his Blue and White party. But the coalition that's leading the opinion polls right now is led by Gadi Eisenkot. Gadi Eisenkot with his Yashar. Yashar means straight. With his straight party, he's leading. None of them is giving an agenda which is liberal compared to Netanyahu. They are not as religious as Netanyahu. Their Netanyahu is far to the right, but they are all accusing Netanyahu of being weak, of having become too dependent on Washington, of having achieved too little with this war against Iran. So once again, you can see the leader in a democracy who, in a way, has at least on points won the war. He hasn't lost the war, but He's probably paying the price for this. Nothing will happen to the Iranian regime, nothing will happen to IRGC's leadership, but this will greatly influence the outcome of Israeli elections this year. Two of the challengers against Netanyahu, by the way, are former army chiefs. So Eisenkot started out as an infantryman in the famous Golani Brigade, and he became the 21st chief of staff of Israeli Defense Forces, served from 2015 to 2019. Benny Gantz, General Benny Gantz, was the 20th IDF chief from 2011 to 2015. These were also members of a national security cabinet that was once set up and finally left because they just could not stand Netanyahu. So those battle lines are also being drawn right now. And there, this angry criticism, unhappy, ridiculing criticism of Netanyahu by Donald Trump is also playing a role.